Hello and welcome to the CleanSlate theme development tutorial series. My name is Adam and today we are talking about working on CleanSlate themes locally with Hammer VM. In the previous video we talked about installing Hammer VM, so if you haven't checked that out or if you don't have Hammer installed, please go and check that out. Today we are going to look at what it actually looks like to use Hammer and Hammer VM. So as we would always do, we first need to start Hammer VM, so I can either type Hammer start or I can do it manually. So I'm just going to do that manually here. So I'm going to change the directory to my sites folder and then go to Hammer-VM and type Vagrant up. And after doing this, my virtual machine will boot. I'll go ahead and pause it and wait for it to finish. And there we go. Hammer is indeed running, and it says I can check out my themes in the at localhost 2000, so I can just go ahead and paste that into my browser. As we've been working with the CleanSlate Toolkit theme for this entire time, I'm going to keep working with that theme. I'm going to click on Views, and then let's say I want to go to the Backpage template. So this is what your site's preview looks like, and keep in mind this is on your local machine, right? This is not anywhere in production on CleanSlate or anything. This is on your local machine. So what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to open this theme in my code editor. So let's actually go to my file system, and I'm going to open the CleanSlate Toolkit by just dragging it and opening it here. So one of the core concepts behind Hammer is that it's got this mock_data file. The mock data file is like your entryway to Hammer. And we're going to talk a little bit about the different things that are happening in this file and how you can use it to develop your site locally. So the first thing to know about the mock data file is that it's a YAML file. It's a YAML file. So if the formatting here looks a little strange for you, doesn't look quite right, make sure the file type that you're using in your code editor is YAML. Furthermore, this file is space sensitive, so it does matter that you use spaces instead of tabs, and you have to use 2 spaces as your indent length. So you'll notice down here I have my tab width. I said indent using spaces, and the tab width is 2. In general, at W, we generally use spaces, and we always indent with 2 spaces. So if you have, for example, if you indent using 4 spaces, everything's going to blow up. Things are going to not work for you. So make sure you're indenting using 2 spaces and 2 spaces only. So you'll notice that in this file there is a few what I will call keys. This shared themes is a key, editable region is a key, and site, page, etc., etc. These are all keys, and under some of these parent keys are nested keys. So for example, in previous videos we talked about the almighty editable region, basically places on your page, on your template, where a content author can add and edit add and edit content in the CMS. So on our page, if we actually look at, for example, our back page template, there is an editable region called main. It's got a name of main, and if we go over to our mock data file, you will also see here that there is a main editable region key here. So, and if we go back to our page, it says this is the content for the main editable region. Change what it says in the mock data YML file. Well, we're looking at the mockdata.yml file right here, and that is exactly what it says. So if I wanted to change this to something else, I could say hello world, All right, save the file, go over to my page that's on localhost 2000, refresh, and look at that. It says hello world, right? So to do that again, I can type something else in here. I could say this is a demo, and hit save, refresh, and it updates it updates when we refresh our page on our local machine. So if, for example, I wanted to go to my back page template and add another editable region under this, I could say, I'm just going to call it second. I don't know, whatever name you want. And I can say second colon, and then there we go. I can type that in there, and look at that. There's my content for the second editable region. Maybe I want to come in here and make this on its own line. I could wrap it in a div, right? Hit save, and boom, there it is. Maybe I want to make this a simple editable region, and then I could change this to be an H2. And there it is. There's the content right there. So you can make changes using Hammer and using the mock data file right here and see those changes immediately. So right now in this editable region, I am basically only entering text, right? I'm saying here, put this text inside this inside these editable regions. If I didn't want to do that, maybe I want to have, maybe I want to have this be just a normal editable region here. And I'm going to remove the type simple because we're going to have some rich text in there. I am going to go ahead over here, and if I want to insert like actual HTML from my mock data file in here, what I can do is I can insert a pipe, hit enter, and then hit tab and insert some HTML in here. So maybe I want to insert a heading 3 into this region, and I go over here and I've done that. I've inserted a heading 3. Make that a little bit bigger for you guys here. There's my heading 3 right there. I'll make this just a little bit bigger. So there's my heading 3 here. Here it is in my dev tools. I can change this in the file here. I can maybe say, oh, I want this to be a heading 4, and make sure that's a 4 as well. There's my 4. I can come over here and say, oh, let's find this here. Boom, there's my heading 4. So if I wanted to add a lot of HTML, there's this website called HTML Ipsum. I guess they've changed the URL these days. I can get a bunch of HTML over here, and I can make sure I still have that pipe character here and just paste this in here. And you'll notice that stuff is still highlighting. It is correctly indented right here. If stuff is not still highlighting, something looks weird, then check your indentation. So I come over here, save it, and I will go back to my page here, hit refresh, and there is all of our HTML that we put in that mock data file. So I hope that's helping show you that you can actually add multiple editable regions to your site, and you can actually put in content here that will like mock the content that you're going to put on the production site, and you can kind of see how that is helpful when you're developing locally and trying to develop a site, make a theme and develop a site. So let's take a look at some of the other keys in this mock data file. You'll notice at the top here that there's actually this Hammer depreciation warning. Hammer will tell you things that if stuff is incorrect. So it's telling us right here that the mock data syntax that we are using for shared themes is depreciated and out of date. And we should use the new shared syntax theme in the wiki, which we can click on and go straight to the wiki and straight to the place where the shared theme is. So this is the one that we're using right now, and this is the one that we should be using. So I'm going to go ahead and update that because yeah, we should use the new syntax, and we don't want to see that error anymore. So if I save that and I go over here and refresh, boom, that error is gone, and it kind of cleans up the page really nicely. So when you're developing with Hammer, you might see a number of errors or warnings like that. When you do, just go ahead and take a look and read the error, and it should tell you what to do. We mentioned over here that there's actually documentation for what mock data looks like in the Hammer repository. So if you want to navigate to this from the Hammer VM repository, remember this is where we installed Hammer. We followed the instructions to install Hammer in the last video. You can actually click on the link to Hammer, and then go to the wiki, and then go to mock data file, and it actually has all the documentation for all the stuff that you could put inside the mock data file. So definitely take a look at this documentation. It's got a ton of information and resources for you there. And it even has an example of a complete mock data file. And I find myself referencing this very frequently. The next thing that we're going to talk about for our theme is, so one of the things that we have the ability to do in Hammer is there's this bar at the top that kind of allows us to navigate between different, so I can go back to my views folder pretty easily. But sometimes when you're making a page, you just want to see your theme only. You don't want to have this bar on the top. So what you can do is you can actually take this. I'm going to close a couple of these tabs here. You can take this hammer nav key right here and put it at the top of your file, and actually have the nav, you can have it disabled, false, or true. So right now it's false, it's going to show. If I refresh my page, it's still there. If I set it to true, it hides it. So it kind of gives you, if you want to hide it, you can get the overall design for your site and have kind of nothing interfere with anything there. Another thing that you can do in Hammer and in your mock data file is actually show and hide content for edit mode. So in the documentation, again, there is this edit mode false and edit mode true thing right here. So we can actually take this and paste it in here, make sure our spacing is correct. And right now it's essentially saying edit mode false, meaning on my current page right here, if I hit refresh, this is going to pretend that edit mode is not active, whereas we actually have this R edit mode only that's available in the tag documentation. CleanSlate CMS, how-tos and tips, theme development, tag documentation, R edit mode only. And what this does is sometimes you have some complex themes which require some instructions for your content editors. So what you can do is you can provide, and just to make this really clear, I'm going to put this as an H1 so it stands out a lot for us. What you can do is you can actually provide instructions for, and I am actually going to I'm going to remove our second editable region just so we can get really clear here. You can provide instructions for when your content editors are in edit mode, and if you change this value in the mock data file to true, and you have a tag that has this kind of thing going on in it, then you can say, I only want to see this when editing the page. So you can set edit mode to true in your mock data file, and then you can see the instructions and style those instructions for your content authors when they're in edit mode. Now if I change this back and hit refresh, it's going to go away. Now that we've talked about this edit mode key, let's look at a couple of the other keys that we have in this mock data file. So you'll notice that we have a site and page key. So as we mentioned before in previous videos, every site has an ID, and you can define the site ID here. Every site has a domain, every site has a name, and you can actually edit those here. So if I actually look at this, up in the top of my bar, my address bar here, it says this is my site name. What's actually happening here is if I click here and then I view the title, it says this is my site name. This is being pulled from my default layout. This is being put into the title tag right here, so our site name. And we can actually change this right here to something else. So I'm just going to say Honors College, and I hit refresh, and if I look inside my head, you can see there it is, Honors College right there. So similarly, if we want to output like a site ID, So I'm going to just go ahead and remove this and say this is my site ID, and I'm going to say in a paragraph our site ID, and I want to output that onto my page, and I hit refresh. My site's ID is 26. So I can come into my mock data file here, change this to, well, 12,567, and hit refresh here, and it changes to that ID right there. Similar to the site key, there's also the page key. So you'll notice the page key has site ID, or sorry, page ID, page name, page slug, all this stuff. So if I were to go back to this file right here, my Backpage template, and change this to page ID, and I look and see that, okay, our page ID is actually 2, and I refresh the page, there it is. I could change this to 2,467, hit refresh, there's my page ID. Maybe I want to make maybe I want to change this. I'll say, okay, so at the top right here is actually already using the page name. So it's saying our page name, which is what's going to be output right here. And this is it right here, right? So you can kind of start to see a pattern with all of these keys and their values, and how you can use those in tags within CleanSlate. So another thing that you can customize in Hammer is how your menus look. So for example, this is the site menu. This is the main navigation of the site. You'll notice here it says hello, world, and then some random characters here. We can actually say here, I don't know, what do we want to say? Computer right here. And it changes in the main navigation. So we can customize the look of our navigation by changing, so for example, this is the site menu. If we had a sub menu, we could change the look of the sub menu right here, add classes to the UL, the LI, the A's, whatever you need to. Same thing for the ancestor menu. One thing that is included inside Hammer is this faker stuff. So Faker is actually a gem that is included inside Faker, and it is a library for generating fake data such as names, addresses, and phone numbers. We mostly just use it to output, different words or different sentences, maybe some paragraphs. So for example, in the main navigation of our site right now, every time we refresh, these last 3 words are going to change, and that is happening via Faker. That is because we are saying we're initiating Faker, and we're getting some lorem ipsum, we're getting a word and capitalizing that word. And you can get more stuff from Faker by scrolling down in the documentation and looking under generators, and they have a number of stuff. So you can get address, date, whatever. So we have a ton of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff already included in here. For example, maybe we want to take this lorem paragraph and generate 10 paragraphs for the main editable region. We go back here, go back to our site, hit refresh, and boom, there's a bunch of content that we can just kind of use to see how it would look. You can see every time I refresh, it changes. If you don't want lorem ipsum, you can reference the documentation for other types of words that you can output. For example, on the sidebar here, we have, I believe it says hacker say something smart. So every time I refresh the page, it's going to say something like the RAM bandwidth is down, override the optical pixel, blah, blah, blah. Transmitting the protocol won't do anything, blah, blah, blah. So you can also output real words if you like. So that's a little bit about editable regions and Faker. Let's take a look real quick at what a blog would look like in mock data, in your mock data file. So I have a blog key right here. And each blog, you can actually have multiple blogs on a site. So each blog is driven by this ID at the root here, and you have to note that this number must match the ID from the page key in order to display the content below. So I have actually gone and made my page ID 2. So I'm going to scroll down to the second blog ID, and this is my blog name, and then these are my articles. If I go over to my blog index template here, you can see that this is my blog index. It's got 3 articles listing right here because I have one article here, one article here, and one article here. So if I were to go and change the name of this blog article, this blog post, I could say first post and hit refresh, and there it is. That's my first post. So one thing that's a little bit different here is that we're actually using the structure to loop through the articles in the articles key and output the content you see right here. You'll notice that this content key has our editable regions. So if I actually were to go into the blog index file and I look down in here, there's this R article content, article body. So this is actually pulling content from an editable region inside the blog article template. That's a little bit, more than what we've covered so far, but this is the editable region on the blog post or blog article template, and then this blog index kind of loops through all the children of the index and pulls in the content for the blog article body. And then in mock data, we can say, okay, this is the editable region name, this is the content, the editable region name, and we're going to output that content right here. You can do a similar thing with pages. So for example, in the brand patterns repository, if you go to github.com/www/brand-patterns and then click on mock data, there is a template in that theme that is a profile index template, and it acts similarly to a blog index template in the fact that it just loops through pages and pulls in content regions from its children. So it'll pull in a content region of the person's name. Since this is a profile index, it's going to pull in the profile individual's name, their phone number, email, short bio, and their image. And you'll notice here, harking back to Hammer, every time I change this actual profile index template uses Faker to generate dynamic content. So you can see if your styles are going to work with a variety of different names and content. And you can actually see, if you scroll down here we go up here to pages, there's an actual pages key. I'll zoom in here for us. There's this pages key, and you'll see that this is the content that's being pulled in, and the content is right here. So it says W profile name, W profile job title, W profile phone, all that stuff. It's being generated and pulled in from right there. So that's a pretty good introduction to mock data and how to use Hammer for local development. All this is in here is key and value pairs. Make sure that you abide by the correct spacing, always 2 spaces. If the coloring doesn't look right, make sure you're using YAML as your code coloring, and make sure that you have the correct amount of spaces where appropriate. I'd encourage you to take some time right now to start Hammer, open up a theme and its mock data file, and play with putting content in editable regions, putting HTML content in editable regions. Just play with all the stuff that we've talked about here today and get familiar with it, because it's going to make you be able to work with your themes locally, and it's really, really powerful. So before we wrap up, I want to make a note, as I said in the beginning of this video about Hammer. Hammer is not, the content that you put in Hammer does not automatically translate onto your site in production. So the content that is in the mock data file is only going to be seen for you in your local development environment. Once you still have to take, you still have to use Git in your command line. For example, if I went back to my CleanSlate underscore themes folder, and then my CleanSlate toolkit thing here, and I run a git status, all this stuff hasn't yet been committed. I would still need to add it and commit it and push it and sync it in CleanSlate in order for this stuff for these changes in my templates to show up in production, right? So, you know, if you were to actually want to have these changes, you would actually do that. You would add, commit, push, and sync in CleanSlate to get these changes to be visible. So I hope that's helpful. We're going to start to really dive into some you know, theming concepts in CleanSlate now that we have our local development environment set up. We know how to create navigation. We know how to work with templates and layouts and partials. So we're really going to start to dive into this stuff. So at this point, if you need to review some of this stuff, I would definitely recommend getting a good familiarity with what's going on here so far. And when you're ready, let's hop right into the next video. See you soon.